doing psychedelics, specifically mushrooms, it's reconnected me to be a kind person despite all my traumas that put up these walls. Being introduced to psychedelics reintroduced me to this more loving side of myself that I really just enjoy.
Welcome to Quest, a journey to wellness. On this podcast, you'll hear stories from queer folks and allies who've taken their happiness and well-being into their own hands by examining what they have found helpful along the way. My name is V, aka Vanessa. I'm a two-spirit human, joy influencer, energy worker, and a dad joke connoisseur. All pronouns accepted.
My name is Kori. My pronouns are he, him, they, them. I'm a transmasculine queer human. I love getting lost in nature, taking too many psychedelics, and anything reckless, really. We hope this podcast brings you joy, where you'll learn, laugh, heal, and grow.
What did the grouchy mushroom tell to the loud mushroom?
What?
Put a cap on it.
That's funny. That was good. I'm bad at dad jokes or like corny jokes or really just jokes.
Yeah, most of my jokes are cheesy, and sometimes you gotta like think about it because it's so cheesy. You're like, wait, oh.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I'm excited for this episode. This is one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, our last episode, we got into functional uses. So this episode, we're getting into de-stigmatizing that fear around psilocybin.
Really just kind of opening up and getting a little deeper dive into the psychedelic world, psilocybin specifically, and how it's kind of played out through society through the years. So a little back history of it, a little information, and some personal experiences. It'll be a fun one.
It's going to be really fun to be able to like share some of our stories, but also share other people's stories in history, you know, with the medicinal use and healing that can come from psilocybin and psychedelics just in general.
Absolutely. One of my personal beliefs is that psilocybin, even as a recreational use medicine, is still a medicine. Even if you're just doing it for some laughs, it'll have lessons in there for you. And I'm super excited to jump into how we can maybe talk about how we can receive those messages and how they can, and what some of them can look like, even if it's not like a God voice talking to you.
Or is it?
Could be.
Right? Yeah. And just letting everybody know we're just sharing information. We're not promoting use or health claims of any kind. And guess who we're bringing back? Stevie Cuo.
That's right. So last episode, if y'all missed it, feel free to go back and check it out. It was on the functional uses of mushrooms. So how they can play a part in saving our environment and play a part in saving humanity. Go back, check it out, listen to that. Like V said, our guest today is Stevie again. So just to give you guys a little bit of background on Stevie, Stevie is the executive producer of this podcast. They are a co-owner of Kinoko with me, and they are a big tiger lover and and harm reduction enthusiast. So one of Stevie's big roles in psychedelics is educating or sharing education around harm reduction.
Stevie was also born and raised in San Francisco, and she aims to anchor their entrepreneurial endeavors using the power of intention and hopes to inspire their community to do the same. So without further ado, Stevie Cua.
Hi, thanks for having me on again, guys.
I was gonna make a joke.
Make the joke.
Well, you're the executive producer. You can put yourself on whenever you want. But you're like, thanks for having me on again because I said so. I'm just kidding.
As I pulled rank and said so.
Exactly. No, you didn't. Just to make it clear, you didn't. And yes, it's good to have you back.
Yeah, we had to like pull teeth to get you on here.
I know you want to see.
We pulled your own teeth.
I pulled my own exactly. I pulled my own teeth. I'm clearly the enforcer.
All right. So how excited are you to get into psilocybin?
I mean, very excited. I don't even know where to start. Where do we start, guys?
Why don't we start with the history?
Our last episode, we touched on Maria Sabina, who is the mother of mushrooms.
Yeah, because she was what
Yeah.
kind of sparked the Renaissance, right?
Yeah. So there was an article written about her by George Wasson, and he also wrote some books on her, which brought her story to the masses. And around this time of the books coming out and the articles coming out, it was the hippie revolution and which led people to want to try mushrooms. And then governments were like, no, we can't do this. So then began the ban of mushrooms. Around this time, there were scientific articles circulating around LSD, which the precursor is ergot fungus, which grows on rye. That hit mainstream. And this also led to studies like Project MK Ultra, where the government was drugging citizens without their consent, trying to find the best interrogation techniques that they could use on their enemies.
Okay, I got two questions.
Yes.
For those people who haven't listened to our last episode, can we say a little bit more about who Maria Sabina is? And then the second question is, you're saying like around this time and all that thing, what is the time?
Oh, good point. Good question. The time frame you're looking at is around the late 50s, 60s, early 70s. And Maria Sabina is the mother of mushrooms. She actually popularized mushroom use in Oaxaca and
Mexico.
Mexico. Yes.
Yeah. That little town that she's from actually really took to mushrooms. So like even their taxi cabs have little mushrooms like on the side, and their whole city's kind of decorated with mushrooms.
Sick.
It's cute.
Yeah. And I believe that after this also came out, I believe that the government there also began the ban of psilocybin mushrooms there too, which is just kind of crazy to think
racist.
about. Yeah, which is just kind of crazy to think about, you know?
Criminalizing plants.
Yeah, well, yeah, criminalizing plants that just encourage free thought and free thinking, whereas what is legal are substances, alcohol that really just numbs us. By all means, I'm not discouraging anyone to get off their antidepressants or any of their sort of anti-anxiety meds. If these are some things that help you, I definitely encourage you to continue these uses. But a lot of the times, the effects can be very numbing, you know? And how do you deal with the traumas that you experience if you are in a state of numbness?
Yeah. And just to throw this out there, none of us are doctors, anybody.
Yes. So. This is all very much opinion, personal experience.
Yeah. And,
you know, I highly encourage anyone who's interested in incorporating these things in their lives to definitely do their own research and formulate their own opinions and thoughts, and also work with people who are experienced in these medicines.
Yeah, speaking of doing the research, that article you sent me on ffungi.com about Maria Sabina, how they were talking about that, it wasn't much of a problem of what she was doing because she was just mostly helping a lot of families out with like addiction or like whatever like problems the families were having. She was having sessions with them with the psilocybin, having them work it out while, you know, under the influence of psilocybin. And then it started happening that after the Watson guy put it out there, that people started showing up and doing hella other drugs on top of whatever she was providing. So then people were just acting crazy in the streets, and then it looked like that she was just trying to like have a party with these people or just like get them crazy and out of their minds, but she had no control of what substances people were taking prior to them going to these ceremonies with her.
I think that a lot of the time people are trying to run away from something, and the way that we understand substances is an escape, right? An escape from something.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say the way that we understand them, but the way that addiction works and the way that substance abuse works for people is typically an escape. I don't necessarily see anything wrong with recreational use, to be honest with you, and this is very much my opinion. Recreational use brought me to my understanding, respect, and love for the culture and for viewing these things as a medicine. But I think that the government especially, organized leadership especially, can jump to conclusions about where people want, I don't know how to explain this.
Without sounding like a
They feel like
conspiracy
they have,
theorist.
yes, I think that they feel like they know better in other people's lives, and they try to dictate what is right or wrong based off their own personal opinions.
Yeah, and very uneducated opinions
Yes.
at that. And there's a lot of it, and I think that a lot of it has to do with religion as well. I think religion also puts a pause to usage of any sort of psychedelic or hallucinogen in the society, in the government that we live in. And also, I don't really like throwing racism around, but racism is also a big factor in the government stopping and prohibiting usage of things like psilocybin mushrooms or peyote or things that indigenous folks have been using in ceremony. You have a lot of different reasons as to why the government wants to put a hold and a ban. And another one is to money. Really, what the government wants to do is anybody in power, they want to get them ahead and they want to get them in a position to own stake in an industry that's going to generate a lot of revenue. And so, for instance, cannabis isn't legal now, like federally, because where the Republicans or like the people in power are going to make their money if we start moving towards those industries and away from ones that have already been established.
Yeah, thank you, Ronald Reagan.
Right. Honestly, we could trace everything wrong to Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
Trickle down economics, y'all.
And to kind of go back to where, like, you know, I really like how you brought that up as far as the war on drugs being racially motivated, because in the last few years, you know, the government has definitely admitted that. And you see that not just within, you know, the indigenous community, but all marginalized communities. I mean, it's just kind of wild.
No white people were arrested in the 80s. And maybe I won't say no, but if I was going to throw out a number, I'd say 0. White people were arrested in the 80s for coke or crack.
Yeah.
I can tell you that.
Yeah.
It was primarily already devastated inner city communities of Black and brown folks.
And I didn't even want to throw that out there because it's not necessarily relevant to this, but relevant to what you're saying. But, you know, the scheduling of cocaine and crack is scheduled much higher than cocaine, yet they are the same. I'm not going to say exactly the same, but they are definitely the same.
Coke is a precursor to crack.
Yes.
And so you're having these same compounds, slightly different.
Yes.
But yeah, and why would people be more apt to buying crack? It's because of the price.
Mm-hmm.
You can get more for it. It's a higher high, and yeah, that's how you devastate communities. But kind of steering back into, I mean, but it's all really tied together.
Yes,
like you can't talk about one aspect of psychedelics without. Well, you can. I don't think you should talk about psychedelics without acknowledging the past, like seriously acknowledging how we've gotten to this point.
Totally.
Because I think it does a disservice to anybody who's been arrested or who accidentally had something or has had a small amount of something and now they're in jail for years.
Totally.
It's not fair. And like, I think it's really fucked up,
Yeah.
to say the least.
Totally. And just like what's going on now, you know, pre-pandemic, just comparing as far as the way people were arrested for weed, and now pre-pandemic, Kori and you and I kind of saw this as far as that new horizon and that the second psychedelic renaissance that was coming, right?
Yeah.
And major pharmaceutical companies starting all these studies on trauma, veterans advocating for, you know, psychedelic use to overcome their traumas of war. And then we saw psychedelics in the stock market, penny stocks. Remember when we bought all those stocks?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. They went up. They doubled in price.
Yeah.
They went down, but I think they'll go back up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
we made a killing, and then we
lost it.
Yeah.
Okay, but whatever. but this is, like you said, this is the second renaissance of it, and the first one kind of started back in like the 60s. Well, really, the first studies happened in the 50s with our government, right? So MK Ultra. They would send it out to professors, actually. So they sent it out to Princeton University, where a lot of professors were doing studies on it. And that's where Ram Dass and Timothy Leary started doing their LSD experiments. So the government was passing out LSD to get studied while they were doing their own internal testing on soldiers. And through that process, they at Princeton, they would hold these little things and do the studies. And yeah, Timothy Leary and Ram Dass got into it there. And at the same time, you have like them doing this spiritual awakening with LSD and psychedelics. And then you have on the West Coast, you have Ken Kinsey, who is doing this, like, you could kind of think about it more as Princeton studies was spiritual, and the Woodstock experiments, like the electric acid Kool-Aid bus stuff with Ken Kinsey, was all recreational, right? So you had this bus going across the country, and they would paint it all these crazy colors. And this was the electric acid Kool-Aid trip that they made. So there was all sorts of people on that bus. I think I want to say like Jack Kerouac maybe, or one of the guys from his books was on it. And so they were just making their way east to go visit Ram Dass and Timothy Leary and be like, yes, we can do this resurgence, or we can do this like psychedelic thing together. And along the way, they had a bunch of like mishaps and whatnot, but they made it to the East Coast. They got to meet Ram Dass, Timothy Leary, like who Ken Kinsley admired. And basically they kind of shoved him out, and they're like, there's really no space for what you're doing with psychedelics. And he was kind of devastated from that point. But I have to disagree. I think there is a space to have that recreational and that fun, especially now. I don't think
Totally.
I think it's a good medicine to find out what fun is. And it's saying a word over and over again until it sounds like something crazy and you're giggling about it. That's
Totally
medicine.
Yeah.
Since we're on the topic of LSD, I have tried it with 3 different people, 3 different times, 3 different amounts. And every single time, it didn't work for me. Like, it just had no effect. Like, there was no change in my mind, in my state, like nothing.
What form did you take them in? Liquid or paper?
Yeah.
One was on a Sour Patch gummy. Another one was like a liquid dropper thing. Another one was kind of like in a vial.
Oh, so they're all liquid.
Yeah. Yeah, nothing, no mind altered state. But a lot of the things that they mentioned, I could experience that sober. Like I go surfing, and after I'm done surfing and I get off the waves, I could see like the water and the trees like in a harmonious dance together. Like I could do that sober, where people explain that experience with LSD, and I'm just like, well, I could do that sober. So maybe like that accessibility of being able to do it sober is why LSD doesn't work on me, or hasn't worked on me.
Maybe.
You're just like in a constant state of being on acid.
Yeah.
For real.
Your brain only functions on acid. Yeah.
For real. Because, like, I mean, mushrooms,
That's funny.
they work. Stuff from the earth works. Maybe it's just my body's like, what's this? What's this man-made thing over here? Get this out of here.
You
I
know,
don't want to knock all synthetic chemicals, but yeah, there's a difference between synthetic and natural for sure.
Yeah, because, like, even with, like, mushroom experiences, like, I know, like, for me, I started using it more to just kind of let go, because I have like this constant like want to control. I feel like when I'm out of control, I feel like I'm getting more paranoid, and I didn't like that feeling. And then I lived with someone who introduced me to mushrooms, and I noticed like my meditations would just like be so much more magical. I realized when I would write, like I wrote with more grace for myself, and I wasn't so like mean to myself or to others. Like I just felt more closer to my heart when I do mushrooms. And I'm sure my partner won't be upset, but she also does it to help with her anxiety. So like real like medicinal uses, and we've sometimes use it in our practices of when we're spiritual cleansing, and we can see the auras a little bit differently when mushrooms are involved, and we're able to do our like chakra cleanses like in such a more beautiful way than without the mushrooms.
I believe Maria Sabina also, when she held her veladas, and hopefully I didn't butcher that, velada, she also took mushrooms as well. I believe she actually took more than what she was giving the people she was healing.
Yeah, that's kind of the way of the shaman, though.
Yeah.
Is to be in that realm with them.
Totally. How can someone guide you if they're just like, hey,
If they're not even there.
make a right? I'm like, but they're I can't make a right.
Right? If you can't see the road, how are you going to tell them when to turn?
I will say, pre-pandemic, when I met Kori, actually, I was just stepping out of a pretty abusive relationship. And I was also like, what am I going to do with my life? I'm X years old, however old I was in the beginning of the pandemic.
I'm an age.
I'm of a certain age. What am I going to do? I feel stuck. I feel a little bit like a failure. I had so much potential. I just kind of got to stick to this job because I know I can do well in it, but I wasn't necessarily fully happy. And Kori and I ate a chocolate bar, and I laughed so hysterically that I popped a blood vessel in my eye.
Oh my God. So I'm assuming that this chocolate bar was psychedelic?
Yes, definitely. It was definitely a mushroom, psilocybin chocolate bar. Kori comes down.
It was delicious too.
It was delicious. Yeah, it was so good.
You're still laughing till this day.
Yeah, that was funny. I remember Stevie and I was upstairs and Stevie was downstairs, and we were on the phone with each other. And I walked down the stairs. And we were just laughing on the phone together, just like
in the same house.
I missed him. Yes.
Yeah, in the same house, just on the phone laughing. But I had to go upstairs, so I had to go to the bathroom. So I went upstairs, but we couldn't not be like with each other. So I called, and we were just laughing. And then I went back downstairs, and Stevie had a busted eye, like blood vessel. It was just red, like her whole eye was red. And then at some point we were just on the floor and we couldn't stop. Like it was ridiculous.
Yeah. It was, and Kori and I have definitely had some really beautiful experiences that we shared together. And
Oh yeah.
I think in a lot of ways, both student and teacher, for me, like that's what it felt like, where I learned so much from Kori, and he also thanked me for like the things that I taught him, and vice versa, and I think that's just kind of what made it solidified for us even more that this is where we want to be. That's my life partner.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, that reminds me. So last year in January, I did about 14 grams of mushroom.
Sorry, my jaw hit the ground. I don't know if y'all heard that. That is a lot.
I saw you.
That is a lot.
Yeah.
That is a lot.
It's a bit. So I did 14 grams of mushrooms first thing in the morning. I think, I don't know, 9:30, 10 o'clock, empty belly, straight to the dome. And I sat at my typewriter for like 6 hours and I typed out all of my growing up experiences and traumas and forgivenesses and like around me and others. And it was really, really beautiful. And the second I was done, like I sat there straight. I was like a crazy person, just like on the typewriter, one finger at a time, click, 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 click. 6 hours later, I was like, oof, okay. My palms are sweaty. I like ended up in my tidy whities. I'm just like sweaty. And then, and it's January, so I shouldn't be sweaty. But then I like finish up and I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like it's not hitting me as hard as I thought. And then it was like, and I was like, oh, there we go. I was transported to every past trauma growing up, like everything that I wrote about. I like ended up in that space and I was like, oh no. And I couldn't help but laugh and cry literally at the same time. Like laugh because it really didn't mean anything, but cry because it hurt my feelings. I was just like, oh my goodness. Like I called Stevie and I was like, I was so sad. I was like, my dad wasn't ever there for me. And then I just started laughing and I'm crying. And Stevie's like, oh, it's okay. Like, I'll be your dad. And I was like, okay. And I was like, that's perfect.
I was about to say that.
And I'm like laughing and crying. And then I'm like, it's okay though. I'm okay. Look at me. I'm good. And then I would laugh because like really, if you zoomed into me, I'm like, in the fetal position on the floor next to a heater, like, I'm okay.
In your underwear?
In my underwear, exactly. In my little tidy whities. I was just like, oh, and then get this. So then I didn't even realize it, but I shit my pants. So I'm just in my little shit tidy whities.
Oh my goodness.
On the floor,
Oh my
just
goodness.
cry laughing about everything.
And I felt so bad because this time we were not in the same house. I was in Southern California visiting my ex at the time.
Oh my
And I was
goodness.
like, it's okay.
But
It's okay.
It was-
I love you.
Aw.
yeah, and it was so healing just to like hear like I love you. And then so I got off the phone with Stevie and then I was like, what am I gonna do? And then I was like, my dog. And then I went out, got her because she likes to go sit outside sometimes. I got her. And then I was like, oh no, like you're gonna get so old and die. And then I was like crying again.
Aw.
And then I was like, I just need to go shower. So I went upstairs and I showered and I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, damn, I'm handsome. And I was like, I would never say this. Like I would never like look at myself ever. Like I don't, it's like, okay, whatever. But like I was looking at myself and I was just smiling. I was like, wow, like you're pretty. Like I like you. And I was like, damn, how come I never liked me before? Like, how is it so hard to be like, damn, I like this. You look like good looking guy. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I get to be me. And then it was really awesome.
I'm pretty
showered.
sure I was somehow on the phone with you at that time again.
You may have been.
Because I remember going, you are handsome. You are a good looking boy.
Yeah. And I was probably going, yeah, I'm handsome.
And I was like, yeah, you are so handsome.
I'm like, look at me.
It's like, yeah.
Oh.
But it was honestly the best I'd ever felt about myself ever. And I showered, and at one point I was on the phone with my sister, and me and my sister, we always have these like crazy like paranormal things happen when we're both together. Last time we were on mushrooms in her garage, we were chatting about like life and our parents and growing up and like trying to, confide in each other, having this very similar growing up experience, and not everybody has that similar experience. So like to have a sibling that you can like lean into that with was really nice. But she had a speaker that was plugged in. It shouldn't have been beeping. It was like boop, 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 boop. And it started beeping. And then we were just tripping because like I have it recorded. Maybe I can like section it out and like we'll add it to the show notes or something. Cause it was like, what? Like it shouldn't have been beeping. Anyway, I'm on the phone with my sister, and that's whenever I start seeing energy, and energy is just flowing all around me in all the directions. I could see some of it hitting my phone, and I can touch it. And so I started touching all the like energetic wires with like my energy body. And whenever I started messing with those things, my sister on the phone, like her voice started going out. She sounded like a robot. I sounded like a robot. It got choppy. And I was like, I am legit fucking around with some like energy right here. And like, I don't think that would have been possible. And it wasn't just me, because she validated it for me. She was like, no, this is actually happening. And neither one of us were moving anywhere. So yeah, I wouldn't have ever been able to interact with like that universal energy had I not been that high.
Well, that's real.
And it was such a gift.
That's real, because when we do, our cleanses for each other, like, and we can see that stuff, and we can see like, we can see, it's weird to say this, but we can see whether it's good or bad. And when we can see that it's bad, we're like pulling it off and like throwing out the window and being like, Earth, like recycle this, turn this into a flower or something.
Like I like to think about it as like serving and not serving.
Yes. Yes.
Just because I think good and bad can be too trivial. I think, or like not trivial, but I think the misinterpretations of it are too easy.
Yeah,
totally.
And I think a lot of people deem things bad when they're just not serving.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. We usually say that it's here with good intentions towards you or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think a lot of people like to get deterred when they talk about their bad trips. And, I'm not anyway going to invalidate that, if it's too much for them to take on at the time. But I try to remind them that, sometimes we go on trips and everything goes wrong, right? Like family vacations, trips somewhere, everything goes wrong. But it's also what you take and learn from those things, those obstacles that we come across. I personally haven't necessarily done 14 grams. I'm more of like 2 grams and below. I usually use microdosing techniques as well. And it did help me through a few things. Like, I stopped smoking cigarettes for, I want to say like 3 years. Just like that. Just one day, just told myself, I don't want to do this. It's interesting. Figure out your dose. Highly recommend. Figure out your dose.
Also, like the microdosing thing, just like as a disclaimer on that, like I wouldn't go long-term microdosing. There hasn't been a lot of studies, and it could just deplete a lot of serotonin in your body. Because if you're actively, like constantly activating those receptors, it might not be the best. They're still doing studies on it, but keep that in mind. If you're going to do a microdose regimen, keep it to like a month at that. Don't go over that too often. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm sure there'll be studies out soon, so you can look into that for yourself.
For just relaying some things we've read.
Yes, exactly. The unfortunate part of this whole thing really is the legalization of it is kind of going to be a little bit of a downfall because it's going to be so expensive to get treatment. So they're saying that right now the average cost of having a psilocybin treatment is probably about $25,000.
So
Like that to
wild.
me is gatekeeping at its max.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, you look
Yeah.
at things like, well, ketamine is kind of classified as a psychedelic in that broad spectrum when people classify it, but it's more of a dissociative. So it's not necessarily the same thing. But even ketamine clinics, like you're looking at upwards of like $7,500 to $10,000 to get ketamine treatment, which is wild because I've allegedly heard that you could get it for much less.
And I think
Yeah.
it's really interesting. This thought just popped in my head while you were talking about this. I don't know how true it is. It could be me being a conspiracy theorist or whatever. But putting such a high price on that kind of help, on that kind of healing, makes me think that they're trying to keep the rich healed, the rich like getting this mind processes going, and they're trying to make it harder to be accessible to those who are not so rich, and to keep them on a certain mindset or certain frequency, and that learning more about yourself and breaking those different barriers in your brain. I feel like they're trying to just leave it for the rich.
Absolutely.
Totally.
And also, I mean, just until legalization happens, you can't, it's exactly what Kori says too, the gatekeeping with money allows so much protection, right? And so it's just wild when you see the comparison of like all these retreat centers, and when you actually respect and understand a community or culture that will just take you in, embrace you, teach you everything about it, teach you about yourself, and have you open up to yourself and just coming into yourself in so many radical ways, right? Like self-awareness, honesty, acceptance, and just really healing that inner child without doing the years of inner child work.
Yeah.
And this is where I think it's important to create a religion, because for me, psychedelics is a belief in power. It's a belief in like the universe and what God is to me. And so to be able to practice a religion with the freedoms of utilizing the sacraments of these plants would be ideal. So starting a church would be really fun.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some out there.
I would say
There are a few.
Yeah, I would say in a lot of ways, something like it's very similar for me too, where, me actually doing psychedelics, specifically mushrooms, it's reconnected me with the same sort of good aspects that the religion that I grew up with. I think like the good things from the religion that I grew up with, it's reconnected me to that and wanted to be a kind person despite all my traumas that put up these walls. And that said, like, no, don't do that. Don't go out of your way and help that person because that person might like do this to you. That person's taking advantage of you. And being introduced to psychedelics reintroduced me to this, I'm not going to say carefree, but more loving side of myself that I really just enjoy.
Compassion.
Yeah, same. It connects you more to that grace. And in terms of
Mm-hmm.
religion and spirituality, I think that it's opened up my mind to explore it differently because I was raised in the church. And even when being raised in the church, I was already questioning things. And I went from me like questioning things, and instead now I'm just like, oh well, I like that. I'm gonna steal that, or I don't like that. That is not needed. That is not necessary. And in college, like going through all these different courses and learning about other religions and spiritual practices, and then also trying to come back to my indigenous roots, like learning a lot of these different things, you know, I'm seeing that a lot of it is the same, just different names.
It's so funny. So I was down visiting my family in San Antonio, which is primarily Catholic. My whole family is, my indigenous side is Catholic, which I'm not fond of. But I was talking to my uncle and I was telling him about like how I believe in God to be, or like what I believe God to be, and how I believe in a God inside of all of us, and nature being God, and unifying all of those aspects and elements, because there's no me without you and vice versa. And there's no nature without me, and there's no me that's separate of nature. And I was telling him all this and he was like, you know what? You sound like a Catholic. And I was like, oh, barf. And I was like, but isn't it funny that I can say all these things and you would still say that I sound like a Catholic, and yet nothing that I said has anything to do with the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so in my head, I'm like, so maybe we can move away from Catholicism, right? Maybe.
Right.
Yeah. And, I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with like spirituality and religion. It's those that infiltrate these religions and spirituality, like even in like psilocybin, right? Like you still have people that are trying to monetize it for their own personal gain, right? It's these people that infiltrate it and really just want to manipulate all for personal gain.
Institutionalized religion.
I would stop you there because I think religion is absolutely at the heart of it all is institutionalized. And I think that it always has been a facade. And I think the people who follow it now, and like, I don't want to like piss anybody off, and this is my own personal belief, but like, it's just blind belief and trust in a system that has and always will be corrupt. They started in with power and taking lands and utilizing people, and they continue to.
Land back.
And so I do have a problem with religion. Yeah, exactly. I do have a problem with religion in these elements. And I don't think that people shouldn't be spiritual. I just think maybe there's a little bit more that you can like critically think about when thinking about spirituality, and not just blindly believe in a religion that maybe, if you don't know the history of it like fully, and you've only been told what the history is on one side and not actually looked into Christian crusades and things like that.
Yeah, religion is weaponized.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with religion or spirituality, but the weaponization of religion by individuals who infiltrate it for their own personal gain is the thing that is wrong, right?
Right. And I see that. And also I feel there's a difference between religion and spirituality. And I think spirituality you can find within. And I think a lot of psychedelics bring out the spiritual side of you. And a lot of the religion helps like reinforce the stories and the things. And like, again, those aren't bad. Those aren't bad when you actually act in good faith. But then I don't necessarily I think you could still act in good faith without having to hold on to the Bible or any biblical structure. I think if you have that ability to do that, you can take that with you through, and that would transcend any religion. Whereas I don't think it's the other way around.
Yeah. Which I think that psychedelics definitely have helped me become less reliant on reaching through someone to connect higher. That now with psychedelics, like it's brought me like, no, like I have direct communication. I don't need to go through a group or a person or through other people to get to that higher connection.
And that's really beautiful. And I would say like I have a very similar sort of like understanding on that. Unfortunately, not everyone has the ability to do so. And so, sometimes they need a guide, and sometimes it's a misguided guide, or sometimes it's a guide who has their own personal agenda. It's unfortunate.
I don't think everybody should stray away from religion if that's what they choose to do. Or, whatever belief you choose to believe is your belief, right? The thing is like, I just want everybody to act in like with good faith and like who they are as a person. And I think psychedelics also bring you to who you are as a person. I think they help you explore all those avenues of self that maybe you hide, or you quiet down, or you are embarrassed of, or you love too much, or they allow you that ability to go inside. And another thing with them is like the emotional acuity that you gain from psychedelics. And I think a lot of how we function is important. It's important to function utilizing emotional intelligence, because it helps with the understanding of outside of yourself and inside of yourself.
I love this. I love this.
I think there's a lot of, so going back to religion briefly, but there's a lot to go into, like the Holy Trinity. The Holy Trinity, think about it like this. It's your mind and your heart and your stomach, right? And if you can tap into all three of those, that's like the perfect balance of self. Like your stomach is intuition, your heart is compassion, and your brain is logic. So being able to be logical, compassionate, and like intuitive, like is a really good balance of how you can like keep in line when you move through the world.
I like that. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Now I look at it differently.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, but we often forget our gut. But our gut actually produces more serotonin. 90% of our serotonin is produced in our gut, which is like, that's a big deal. So if we forget like a whole third of our being, then how do we move from there?
Yeah, because I've
impartial.
understood it like mind, body, and spirit, but like the mind, body, and spirit of Jesus Christ instead of like of myself.
You're going to do the sign of the cross and think of something different now.
Yeah.
I'm just go down. I'm gonna go down and touch my belly button, my heart. And be like,
wait, lower, higher.
Yeah, whenever I start my church, it'll just be like, do.
What's the shoulder? What would you compare
the Father,
shoulder?
Son, the Holy Spirit.
What would you say this is? Wait, that. What would this be?
I wouldn't do the shoulders. I would just go down. So it'd be like the mind, the heart, and the stomach. Boop, 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 boop. You can't see it, but yeah, it'd just be a straight line down. Yeah.
But the heart's here.
Yeah. When I was like, when I meditate, I have one hand on my heart and one on my belly. Because I laid down.
Yeah, see, that's important too. While we quiet this and then bring attention to this. Mm-hmm. It's important because our brains are always going. And I think that's a cool thing about hallucinogens too, is it like opens it up and shows you something new and breaks the monotony of it. Mm-hmm. So your brain is like, wait, I don't know this pattern. What are we doing?
Let me take a back seat real quick.
Yeah. I know. And it's so crazy when you, what is it, like an fMRI? How it shows like the brain on any of these substances have all these like, what is it? Help me out, Kori.
Like
neurons.
Like light
the
ups,
default
like
mode,
where it's all triggered.
Yeah, in the default mode, you see like all these like neurons just lighting
They're
up.
all lit up.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's like Christmas tree or 4th of July. Oh. No, not 4th of July. It's like a Christmas tree.
Like a rave.
It's like a rave. There you go.
It's like the raver doing the light show.
Yeah. Your eyes are crossed.
Yeah. Whoa.
Yeah.
For me, and when I first got started, like it was really intimidating and really scary. Do y'all have like any recommendations of like a guide or like something to kind of make it a little less scary so like people can understand and know?
So I'm going to go and say set and setting would be your number one go-to for figuring out whether or not it's a place that you want to take mushrooms or not. Like if you're in a place and you are physically in a place, like mentally, physically in a place where that seems like something you could do, I would say that's the first place, like way to figure out whether or not you're going to take mushrooms. Like that's first and foremost. Think about where you're at mentally and where you're at physically, and then proceed. If you're going to go and do like bigger doses, take a little at a time. You can always take more. And also if you're doing it multiple days in a row, it loses, like you create a
Tolerance.
yeah, you create a quick tolerance for it. So if you take a gram on one day and then you take a gram the next day, you're not going to have the same high as you would on the first day.
I'll say when I first started trying mushrooms, I'm a pretty calculated person. So I did my research. I came across the godfather of mushrooms, which is Paul Stamets. And he has his own recommended regimen as far as what you can start with as far as microdosing. The one thing that I would highly recommend for people, yes, absolutely setting exactly what Kori said, but also prior to, I guess my routine was write down my intentions, what I want to get out of it. So that way I don't lose sight. Because I mean, as anyone that knows me, I think our producer said it today, goldfish brain, that's me. So sometimes I can forget the intention in which I started that regimen or why I started it. And whenever I find myself lost in that day or just kind of forgetting my path, I refer back to my notes or to my journal. And I'm like, I don't know, like I want to get in better shape. I want to be better in this way. I want to, like the other example I gave you earlier, stop smoking. And it just kind of reinforced things for me as well. I also had some positive affirmations in there, which I think were really helpful to bring me peace throughout my day. And this practice was more in the microdose setting for me. So I didn't necessarily feel anything either, but I feel like it definitely had a long lasting impact on the way that I am now.
To add on to that, like for me, I don't write down my intentions, but I just go in saying that I'm open to seeing what is to be shown to me. And it's about handling the things that come up for me as they come up. And hopefully a lot more of it is like fun. And some of it is a little more challenging, like work. But I think all of it at the same time is important. So it's like you can't work every day without a break, you know? So being able to go into some of these trips with just the intention of laughing or like the idea of like, I'm going to discover what is going to be shown to me, I think is also equally as valid as writing them down and going in and constantly like, okay, this is, I don't want to lose sight of this, or like, what mantras can I have for that? Another thing to do is just listen to yourself. If your body is saying now's the time to try it, by all means, that's probably the time for you to do it. Also, another suggestion I would have is doing it in nature and when you don't have a lot of things going on. So, like if you have a day to clear out, bring your water, get some snacks, eat before you take it, go for a hike. Don't get lost, have a map, you know, so you don't have to think about things because you don't want to get scared because you're like, oh no, I don't know where I'm at. You know, Boy Scout that, be a little prepared, have your stuff, and set aside 8 to 10 hours of just like being able to ride that peak and decompress with ease.
Do y'all know of like a guide that's kind of like, I've purchased a chocolate bar before, we're in the back. They like literally break down, like if you take this much, this is kind of what might be experienced, or if you take this much. Do you all know of anything that can be found online that's easily for someone to be able to just kind of have an idea? Because I know a lot of people that I've come across, then they hear microdose, they still think that they're going to get high.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you just Google psilocybin dosing guide. You
Yeah.
can find anything, like relatively everybody's on the same page because mushrooms, they don't fluctuate too much in potency levels. There are some out there that are way more potent, and that would be like learn your strain. There's so many resources out there where you can Google what strain mushroom you're taking, and then from there you can figure out if it's like a high potency mushroom or a lower potency mushroom, and then you compare it to the dosing guide. And the dosing guide is literally the weight of the mushroom. So if it says 0.5 grams, that's 0.5 grams or 500 milligrams of the mushroom body.
Yeah, and don't be afraid. Trees may talk to you.
Yeah. Honestly, just don't be afraid.
Yeah.
It's a good way to let go.
And you're not going to do anything dumb.
You
People
know.
don't do crimes on mushrooms, so... Or at least I don't think so.
I mean, not like serious
you
crimes. You might like
Yeah.
streak. You might like do some weird shit.
Right.
I mean,
right,
I don't
right,
think
right.
those are real crimes.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
that's just like someone policing something. Circling back to that,
Policing
someone
freedom.
policing. Yeah, freedom. You know.
Freedom. My body, my choice. I'll run naked if I want.
Yes.
And there's a lot of good shroomery, I think, is a good website. But go on Reddit, Google anything.
Mhm.
There's so much information out there now. And
Mhm.
yes, mushrooms have strains.
And
That is a thing.
definitely, if you like look at like Paul Stamets microdosing, that's like I think that's one of the more popular ways. I guess like most like studied ways. I'm not really sure how to like describe that, but it's definitely something that everyone looks to. I know a lot of like brands are like
Standardized,
emulating-
maybe.
Yeah, standardized is a great word for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, do you all have any last things that you want to chat about before we say our thank yous and goodbyes to Stevie?
I think mentioning Paul Stamets is a really great general way to start because this is like the godfather of mushrooms, right? He's like a guy who is a self-educated mycologist and who is very renowned in the mycology community and just like the psychedelic community. Like that in itself is just inspirational, right? Because when you think of a mycologist, you're like, they must have found this passion when they were a child and then went to school and went to college and then got their PhD and then is now still like doing this and working on this as their lifetime thing. But he's just a guy who fell in love with mushrooms and just continued on and, you know, became the biggest, I want to say one of the biggest names when you think of mushrooms, like all mushrooms. Like that's crazy.
He did fall in love with them as a child, though.
I know, I did. And also Carl Hart. I told him a lesbian, y'all.
Yeah. You're like, I just want to cuddle him.
I know. I just want to be in the middle of Paul Stamets and Carl Hart.
Man, it'd be awesome to have a conversation.
Okay. I hope that everybody's gotten the information they're looking for and do their research. And also thank you, Stevie, for coming on again and sharing all this.
Thank you for having me.
All these lovely stories.
Thank you all for making this happen.
See you next episode.
Right?
Yeah. Attached below is gonna be the email from Stevie. Executive decision here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be on the next 4 episodes.
Yeah.
That was fun, having your bestie on another episode.
Talking about my favorite stuff with my best friend.
Yeah. Honestly, like hearing all those stories and everything, that was so cute. And not only was the whole thing informative, but it was also fun. Thank you, Queer Kittens and allies. We love you all.
Take care. Until next time. Ciao.
We have so much more to explore and to share with you. Tap that follow or subscribe button to get every episode as soon as it's released. Leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And join our wellness community on Instagram at Quest Wellness Pod. Also, be an official supporter of this podcast by leaving us a tip. The link will be in the show notes. This podcast was produced in collaboration by Kinoko Chocolates and Puka Puka Creative. Executive producers Stevie Cua and Kori Houston. Producer, editor, sound designer Leah Jackson. Associate producer Rafaela Landestoy. Original music produced by Basque. His music is amazing. And we can't forget about the emotional support of our fur babies by Frankie, Ruby, Nugget, and Pukalani. Thank you very much.